Hey y'all, welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome. My name's Stephanie. Thanks for stopping by, and I really hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button and sticking around for a while. I also want to thank each and every one of my current subscribers. Y'all mean the world to me. And if you haven't clicked the notification bell yet, click that bell and you'll get notified every time I upload a video. I'm also over on Instagram. If you want to follow me over there, I'll leave that info in the description box below. Today's video is part of a collab with my good friend Amanda over at 6 Kids and a Glue Gun, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her channel in just a bit. We both put our own unique style twist on 4 similar DIYs. So since I've got a lot to show you today, I'm going to stop talking and jump right into the 4 gorgeous farmhouse decor DIYs. For the first DIY, I will be making a bud vase wall decor piece similar to one I found on Kirkland's website. For this project, I used 5 of the framed Bless This Nest decor pieces from Dollar Tree and began by removing the wall hanger, the back of the frame, and the little black metal tabs that held the back in place. Don't throw away the hangers from the back of the frames. We'll be using 3 of those again once we get ready to finish this piece. Once everything was removed, I took some 100 grit sandpaper and scuffed up the surface of the frame. Now these frames are not wood, they have a kind of contact paper covering, so they're a bit difficult to paint, and I found that sanding did help. Next, I used a ruler to find and mark the center of the small side of the frame on all 5 frames. This is where I'll be drilling a hole for the twine, so I wanted to make sure that I got it as centered as possible. When I had all the centers marked on all 5 frames, I took a drill with a 1/4-inch drill bit and very carefully drilled holes in the top of all the frames. Please be careful when doing this step and don't put a lot of pressure on the drill because these frames are not wood and the drill goes through really easy. Some of the frames did have some of the paper rip on the underside, but that really wasn't a big deal. You won't be able to see it once the wall piece is finished and hanging on the wall. Next, using the Waverly chalk paint in the color ivory and a stiff bristle brush, I heavily dry brushed the front of all 5 frames. After the paint was completely dry, I measured out the center on the back of 3 of the frames and replaced 3 of the hangers I removed earlier. I wanted to get them as close to center as possible because this is how I'll be hanging the piece on the wall. The hangers are very easy to put back into the frames using a hammer and very gently tapping them into place. For the hanging bud vases, I used some thicker jute cord from Walmart, 5 glass bottles from Hobby Lobby, some E6000, and some hot glue. First, I measured out 5 pieces of the jute cord at about 22 inches long, then using E6000 for a long-term and more secure hold and some hot glue for the instant hold, I wrapped the jute cord around the neck of each bottle, alternating the E6000 and hot glue, making sure to keep the two glues separated. I used quite a bit of E6000 on these bottles because I wanted to make sure they were secure enough to hang on the wall without falling, and they were very secure once the E6000 had cured overnight. Once I had the jute all the way to the top of the bottle, I secured it with more E6000 and a clamp from Dollar Tree and let the glue set overnight to fully cure. To make the shape of the wall hanging, I offset every other frame by measuring down from the top of the second and fourth frames 5 and 3/16 inches and used a good amount of E6000 and some hot glue to secure the frames together. Again, make sure not to mix the E6000 and hot glue because they tend to deactivate each other and the piece won't be secure. Once I had all 5 frames glued together, I turned the whole piece over and using a generous amount of hot glue, I reinforced the seams and added craft sticks to add just a little bit more security. I certainly don't want this piece falling off the wall. Then I set it aside to dry overnight. After giving everything a solid 24 hours to let the E6000 completely cure, I then took the bottles and fed the jute cord up through each of the center holes, and then I tied them in a double knot to hold the bottles in place. You can raise the bottles as high or leave them as low as you want depending on where you tie the jute cord. I just eyeballed them to get them somewhat even. I then went in and secured each knot with some Gorilla hot glue. To finish up this project, I just cut up some florals I had in my stash and put them down in the little bud vases and hung it up in my living room. I love how this piece turned out. I think it is a very close dupe to the piece at Kirkland's, and I'm super happy with it. Now, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video, this is part of a collaboration I'm doing with Amanda over at 6 Kids and a Glue Gun. And if you haven't checked out her channel, you're really missing out. She is one of the sweetest ladies I know, and her crafts are absolutely gorgeous. So be sure to head over there and check out her video and channel. I will leave links in the description box below. And be sure to tell her I said hey. Now moving right along to DIY number 2, we're going to make a house-shaped display shelf. I started with 4 of the 6x8 canvases from Dollar Tree, and using my utility knife I removed the canvases from all 4 frames. I'm only going to be using the frames for this project, but I'll be keeping the canvases for future DIYs. Once I have the canvases removed, I very carefully remove all the staples out of the back of the frames and give them all a light sanding with some sandpaper, since all sides of these canvases are going to be visible. To create the floor of the house, I'm using 2 of the wooden planks out of the pack from Dollar Tree and putting them together using some wood glue and craft sticks. I'm sorry y'all, I lost some footage here, but you will see a little later that I ended up using 5 craft sticks along the bottom to help hold the floor together. I just attached them with some Gorilla Hot Glue. To build the frame of the house, I used one of the canvas frames turned on its side and measured about where I wanted it on the floor and used hot glue to hold it in place. I repeated this with another frame on the other side of the floor. Once I had both sides in place, I went back in and reinforced the seams with hot glue. Now don't worry about the gap it's going to leave. I will be filling that up at the end with craft sticks. I just used hot glue for this project and it's all holding together wonderfully, but if you wanted to, you could definitely use wood glue or some other heavy-duty adhesive. For the roof of the house, I took the remaining 2 canvases and hot glued them slightly angled inwards to create the peak of the roof and reinforced all 3 seams with hot glue. Once the frame of the house was finished, I took a couple packs of the longer wooden dowels from Dollar Tree and measured out how long they needed to be along each of the seams and along the front, back, and sides of the house, and then cut them down to size. I don't remember exactly how many dowel rods I used since I was able to get 2 pieces out of some of the dowels. I ended up needing 25 pieces of dowel rods, so I would suggest grabbing 2 packs of dowels just to be safe. Next, I took the dowel rods outside and gave them a good coat of the Rust-Oleum metallic spray paint in the color black stainless steel. While I was waiting on the dowel rods to dry, I took some Waverly chalk paint and ivory and a stiff bristled brush and gave the frame and roof of the house a heavy dry brushing. I did go a little bit heavier in places just to add a bit of dimension. Next, I took some Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and gave the floor of the house one good coat. Once the dowels were dry, I brought them in and glued them in place. I put a dowel on every seam on the outside of the house, 3 on the top of the roof, and 1 along each exposed surface. I hope I'm explaining this okay. I'm having a hard time finding the right words today for some reason. Here you can see the gap in the floor I was talking about, and I just didn't like the way it looked, so I took 2 craft sticks and painted them with some Waverly chalk paint and ink and hot glued them to the bottom of the house. You can still see a bit of a discrepancy in the floor, but once it's styled, no one will even know it's there unless they look really close. That's it for this little farmhouse. I love how it turned out. It's super simple yet very classy. I took a battery operated candle and a mix of eucalyptus and lamb's ear to style it, and it's the perfect addition to my entryway table. Okay, y'all, moving on to DIY number 3, and this little cow planter box has to be my absolute favorite DIY I've ever done. So y'all are going to have to let me know in the comments below if you like this one or not by dropping me a little cow emoji. For the face of the cow, I start by painting the front, back, and sides of one of the oval wood shapes from Dollar Tree with 2 coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color white. Next, using some carbon paper, I transfer over a cute little cow face I sketched out on some printer paper. This was one of my favorite methods of transferring words or simple images onto projects before I got my Cricut, so I wanted to share it with those of you who don't have a Cricut. If you do have a Cricut, you could definitely just cut out the face and save some of these steps. I simply taped the face onto the carbon paper and placed it down on the oval where I thought it would be about centered, and using an object with a pointed tip, I traced the eyes, nose, and some of the spots to transfer it over to the oval. Once the face was transferred onto the oval, I took a fine-tip black paint pen and outlined all the spots, eyes, and nose to make it easier to paint and stay in the lines. You don't have to do this, but I find it helps me paint in the lines better. Next, using one of these small crates from Dollar General, I take the same image in carbon paper and randomly transfer the spots on both sides and back of the crate. Then, using the same black paint pen, I traced over the lines. I love the distressed look of this crate, so I didn't want to cover it with the white paint, but if you wanted to, you could absolutely paint the crate, but I feel like it matched the face perfectly. Once I had everything traced out with the black paint pen, I used some of the Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and filled in the spots, eyes, and little circles in the nose, and then filled in all the spots on the body. After the black paint was good and dry on the face, I took some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ballet Slipper and painted the cow's nose. It took about 2 coats to cover the black outline because I decided during painting that I wasn't too fond of the nose being outlined in black, so I took a very fine brush and painted over the lines. That's totally a personal preference, so paint it how you like it. To make the ears, I use a piece of heavy cardstock, and using the same image I've been using, I transfer the ears over to the cardstock and use the black paint pen to outline the ears. Once the outline on the ears were dry, I took the Waverly chalk paint in the color white and painted the inside portion of the ears. I did end up doing 2 coats since the cardstock was a different shade of white. After the white paint was dry, I took Waverly chalk paint and ink and filled in the outlines of the ear. I decided last minute I wanted my cow to have little hooves, so I took 4 wooden beads from one of the car seat covers I got on clearance at Walmart and painted them with one good coat of the Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. Now that all the paint was completely dry, it was time to assemble the cow. I began by turning the crate upside down and putting one of the beads in each of the 4 corners using hot glue. Then I put the cow's head in place on the front of the crate where I didn't have any of the spots and secured it with a generous amount of hot glue. Then I decided where I wanted the ears and hot glued them into place on the back side of the head. Then right here is where I decided to take it one step further and be a little bit extra. My little cow really needed a tail, so I grabbed some of the white nautical rope from Dollar Tree and measured out about how long I wanted the tail to be, and then painted it with the Waverly chalk paint in the color white. While the tail was drying, I made a little tassel by using black yarn from Walmart and wrapping the yarn about 20 times around my fingers. Once the tassel was made, I trimmed it to the length I wanted and hot glued it to the tip of the tail. Then using hot glue, I attached it to the back side of the crate. Oh my gosh, y'all, this little cow makes me smile every time I see it. I absolutely love it, and I'm thinking it needs a little friend. So I'm going to be making another one soon, so I'll have a pair. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this one. It's definitely my favorite. So on to DIY number 4. I'm going to be making a chicken wire lantern. I've always wanted a lantern like this, but buying them in store can be pricey, so I decided why not make one myself. I started by taking 4 of these hanging decor pieces from Dollar General and very carefully removing the little animals on the front. You need to be very careful because the chicken wire will bend pretty easy on these. I also removed the jute hanger since I wouldn't be needing it for this project. Next, I took some apple barrel paint in the color Beachcomber Beige and painted the frames completely, trying my best not to get any of the paint on the wire. I gave the sides 2 coat and the back 1 coat, and the front took 4 good coats to cover up the dry brushing stuff they had going on. Once the paint was completely dry, I took some Waverly chalk paint in the color white and a stiff bristle brush and heavily dry brushed over the front of the frames. Next, using hot glue, I attached the frames together so that they formed a lantern shape. Be sure to pay attention to how you're gluing these together so they don't come out all wonky and crooked. I did end up having to remake this a couple of times because I wasn't paying attention. I was watching TV, so be sure to pay attention. For the bottom of my lantern, I used some cardboard that I had in my stash. I just traced out the bottom of the lantern and cut it out using my utility knife, then hot glued it to the bottom of the lantern. I really didn't like the cardboard showing on the bottom, so I took some of the jute twine from Walmart and using hot glue wrapped it around the bottom one time just to cover the cardboard. To finish this piece, I decided it needed a little handle, so I took some more of the jute twine and created a little handle on the top of the lantern. That's it for this project, y'all. It was super simple and it turned out gorgeous. I love the little pieces of what look like rust on the chicken wire. I styled it up with a battery operated candle and some greeneries, and it's absolutely perfect. Let me know what you think. Here's the final reveal of all of today's DIYs together. Y'all, I love this collection. I tried my best to make them all as cohesive as possible, and I think I did a pretty good job. But y'all need to let me know in the comments below what you think and which of these projects are your favorites. Don't forget to head over to Amanda's channel and check out all the gorgeous projects she has for you today. And remember, as always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps my channel. And don't forget to click that subscribe button and become part of the family. I'll see y'all next time.